visual 117828.7.
Yo, let's go. That's our homeboy, Rooks G with Operation Neptune. That's our homeboy out there. Please go to his channel, sub to his channel, check out his music. He's got some he's got some wicked D&B jungle. Check out our homeboy, Rooks G, ROOXG. Yo, what's up, everybody? Hope everyone's doing well tonight on this Saturday night. Tonight, we're going to cover Neil Gaiman's American Gods. This is a massive book. This is a massive, it's not a tome, but it's a pretty massive book. So we're going to cover this. And I'm going to try and make my way through this book and give you some explication of the text and deep dive into all sorts of things that are included in this. Norse mythology, Yeats is even in there, Americana from an English perspective. So yeah, we're going to check out Neil Gaiman's American Gods, and it's not going to be a review. It's going to be an analysis. I'm going to try to go pretty deep on this one, homeboy, because this was, of course, a sponsored stream. And let's see, this one's a sponsored stream that we got a while back, and let's see, who sponsored this one? Sorry, this one was not too long ago, but this one was from Nom de Plume. That's it. Nom de Plume. Shouts out to Nom de Plume for dropping $100 to sponsor this one. And I gotta thank you so much. Appreciate you out there. And I mean, I gotta say that I really spent some time on this one, and not just in the reading of the text. I mean, it's a massive book, but I'm a fast reader, so that's not a problem. But I spent a lot of I don't know what kind of time you would call this, esoteric time. Is it esoteric time? Is it kind of thinking time with this book? I'm going to also go into sponsored by Halliburton. Yes, I'm also going to go into Neil Gaiman's Coraline and Click Clack the Rattle Bag, which is a short story, just to give some context for Neil Gaiman. Because honestly, just starting out, like I didn't know this author, and I mean, I gotta say it's fairly unusual. I knew of him, but I'd never read any of his works. We've covered a lot of material here, and I gotta also say that you know this normally wouldn't be my type of reading material, and in fact, because it's not canon, right? It probably will be in the future. The book's it's 2001. It's sort of contemporary with Big Nine event, and so it hasn't really had enough time to breathe as a work of literature. But I can picture this being introduced into sort of lower academia and then eventually becoming some sort of canon related text. Probably not in the canon, but it'll be related to it, and it'll be disseminated. But this isn't, it's not my type of text, and that's because it's hard to explain why, and it doesn't really matter. My point with all this is that it doesn't really matter. It's not my type of book. I'm actually thankful that number one, that somebody sponsored the stream, and two, that they sponsored a stream with something that is sort of outside of my purview, I guess, because I think that it's important when you are reading, when you read, or when you're into any kind of art, that you expose your mind to the the genres and the types of art that you normally wouldn't be accustomed to, because it's important to do these things in terms of opening up your the sort of self debate that you have with your intellect, and trying to expose your mind to a worldview that ordinarily wouldn't be your own, because it'll make it stronger in the end, right? So if I were doing a review, if this were a review channel, this would be different. It would probably be a shorter video, and I'd probably do a video. I don't do videos for a couple reasons, because we do it live here. That's the main reason we do it live. But also, I just it's just not my forte. I'm not good at making videos. That's the thing. I'm not good at like making a video and editing. I've never done that, and it's not really my thing. So that's why we do deep analysis and sort of longer live. And I think that fits. The people that can do videos, like they can be really good at it. And we have friends that are very good at videos, obviously. But so it also wouldn't really fit to do a short review video of this book, because I'm not sure what I would say in a brief amount of time. I think that this one's going to take some expansive I'm going to be as expansive as I can with this work. But it I got to say right off the bat also with this one that it it was difficult for me to read, because it didn't grab me. The book doesn't it didn't take hold of me. It didn't grab me like pretty much all of the works we've done before have. And that includes, we've done works on this channel that are also outside of the things I would normally like. I mean, for instance, like um I don't know, when we were doing some of the 19th century some of the 19th century novels. I think it's important to be able to hold two opposing points in your head, and to be able to understand the importance of a work without particularly liking it. That's just being sort of objective and dispassionate about works. Of course, you have to put your opinion into it, because it's art and it's personal. So what I'll say about this book, just right off the bat, is that it didn't grab me. And one of the main reasons why it didn't grab me was it didn't take hold of me and drive me along with the narrative, was because, well, for a few reasons. But number one, the protagonist and the speaker in the book and the protagonist, Shadow or Shadow Moon, just were not compelling to me. And I see what he's doing here. I see what Gaiman is doing with the way that he structures the narrative, and I'm gonna go into that. But, it didn't take hold of me. I can see why it would grab other people, and that's fine. Why other people would be taken with this novel. I mean, it is big in terms of its, its largesse, its scale, it's like all over the world. It's Norse mythology, it's West African mythology. It includes sort of the pagan pantheon. And so one of the things that I'm going to discuss in the book is how the structure of the book can work towards driving the narrative, and also why it didn't do it for me, as opposed to something that we're going to cover in not too long, which is the Icelandic sagas. We're gonna do a stream that was also a sponsored stream a while back. So we're gonna do a stream on the sagas, and I'm gonna mainly focus on Eagle Saga, the Icelandic saga. And this book obviously takes a lot from the sagas, from the Eddas. And so anyway, it also led me to do a bunch of other reading this week. Not I'm pretty familiar with Norse mythology, but on I did some I talked about this on Boiler Room, name dropping. I'm shouting out Boiler Room because I was on there. Check out check out my appearance on Boiler Room the other night. Shouts out to Hesher and Ruckus, and Jay was on there also. And Grunt, all the homeboys, and Spore was on, and Spore obviously. And I mentioned at one point a thing about how the world that we live in, this is towards the end, I kind of went on a rant about how the world that we live in has there are such differences between the world now and the world even pre 2020, because this is true, like we're in true G reset era. And one of the things that really struck me this week was when I was reading about um an academic who is an expert on European history and German migration in the 6th century, and how there was a scandal in academia about how his notions and his theories about world history, which seem to be um, pretty status quo and canon, 100 years ago, are now seen as completely radical. And they even influenced Breivik, the Norwegian event guy. So they said, these things could lead to such things. And I just thought, this is so insane that I already, and we and you already know that we live in this world that's completely different and everything's changed. And, but, but the main thing that struck me was that the the way that people used to think in terms of out there has completely changed in such a way that everything that we do has been affected by this. So the things you drink, the food you eat, the clothes you wear, where you buy your the commodities, all the concrete things, but also academics, education, and people's basic thinking is completely changed. It's completely different, and the things that we see pushed have totally permeated every area, and it's not going to stop. It's not going to change. So I think that one way to combat that is simply through one of the most practical ways is to read books. Because we've talked before about how books are going away. They're going the way of the fire, and they will eventually go away. And it's not even that books are going away. I'm not sitting here saying that people are outside like throwing books at the flames, but we know that is more of a figurative thing or an electronic thing. But it's even worse than that because the meanings of words are changing, obviously, and words and the meaning of words will change over time according to people's climate, geography, so many different elements. Language sort of evolves, right? Language is one thing that evolves as opposed to the Dinobots. But but you know, i- it's the basic understanding of words that have changed. So anyway, so I'm going to get into that and talk about Gaiman. I'm also going to talk about Coraline, which Neil Gaiman also wrote, and short story. I would say very short story, but I hate saying the word very because it's a qualifier that doesn't really mean anything. But it is quite a brief short story. It's purposefully so. And so my main problem with Gaiman's writing is that I don't. It's like I imagine a person writing a not. It's almost, you know what probably is a good metaphor for this? It's almost like an AI. It's like an AI is writing a novel, if that makes sense. Now that if you I'm not saying that to denigrate him or if you are a huge fan of this, but what I mean by this is that there's something missing. There's some sort of lack of there's like a lack of blood flow in his writing. Writers are writers because although many times when we look into the lives of writers, we see that they are oftentimes introverted or they can be eccentric, but the reason for that is because all of the extroverted elements of their personality are put down on the page. It's almost like they're saved for the page. So oftentimes with introverted writers, as if we care about such a thing, but with introverted writers, we will often get works of literature that are almost extreme. They get to they hit on the points of what it means to be a human being, and the two things that art always concerns itself with, right? Which is our relationship with God and our relationship with each other. That's what art is about. One example from that would be like Emily Dickinson. Now, I don't know what Emily Dickinson was like as a person. We know from her letters, and of course, I know Emily Dickinson in terms of her literature. But we haven't met her and we don't know her, and there's really not that much material. But we do know that the context of her writing is insular, and that seems to be something that, you know, is something that's like we can see as a sort of a contextual theme in her literature. But even that one line, zero, zero on the bone, right? Zero to the bone, a funeral around her heart. Lines like that are so intense. I remember that. Even just the word zero in her literature. If you can, here's the thing. Somebody told me this week that they read they read a Shakespeare play and they didn't understand it at all. They couldn't get anything out of it, but they do remember the word fickle from it. They got the word and that was the first time when they read the play that they'd ever heard the word fickle. And I thought, that's so and I remember like I was shot with a diamond bullet right through my forehead. And I remember thinking, my God, the genius of that, the will to do that. Perfect, crystalline, complete. like Colonel Kurtz. Um, it was like a diamond bullet shot through my forehead. Because if you can really, if you read a book and you remember one word from the book in terms of it's a neologism or it's a new word for you, it's the first time you read that book, the job is done. That is more valuable than understanding anything else about the work of literature. That's what because the medium is words, right? We think in words, we pray in words, we talk, we everything that we do, everything that moves, everything that all the orders that people give and get, and the advice and the life. It's like yes, they show us through actions, but we think about those actions in words. So if you can remember that one word, then I think that that's important. It's like it's like what would be our stream without a Macbeth reference? It's like when I told you about in the Macbeth stream about the word incarnadine, right? Will all great Neptune's ocean, um, what does he say? Incarnadine, making the green one red. Uh, Incarnadine means to redden. Remember, he says in Macbeth that you can't wash his hand. Will great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hands? No, it will the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red. So, in other words, he's at a point in the play where he feels like he can't wash the blood off his hands, literally and figuratively, because to do so would only redden Neptune's green ocean. So Shakespeare invents a word, incarnadine, to redden. So that's more powerful than anything in the play. Like that's like so incredible. And so one thing about Neil Gaiman's work is I didn't get that. I didn't I get the narrative and I get the structure and I get what happens in the book, but I didn't get any of that. So before we dive into this, please make sure you like and share the stream. If you like the stream, please like it. If you're here with us, if you're watching, come hang out in the live chat. Please support my work using the links in the live chat or in the video description or on the channel about page on YouTube. When you go to YouTube, you go to a person's page and you scroll. There's like videos and streams. I'm not saying this sarcastically. I'm saying this genuinely. There's like videos, lives, there's a community tab, and then you scroll all the way over and there's an about page. And you go to about and then you scroll down and you see the links. And that really helps me out. I really appreciate the support. We can always obviously use the support. We need it to further the channel and to keep going. So please think about supporting me with PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, or you can hit the super chat or you can hit the dono chat. You can also sponsor a stream. Please think about sponsoring a stream. This is a sponsor stream from Nom de Plume. We've got a sponsor stream coming up on Icelandic sagas. We just did a sponsor stream on Bob Dylan. And after this one, after the next stream I'm going to do is probably going to be this book, Pillars of the Flower Moon. I haven't read it yet. I've had it for a while, but I haven't read it. And I think it's an apt time to do it because the film is coming out, I think in the summertime. So it's a good time to read that. I've also got, As You Like It, Shakespeare, Great Expectations, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So many books that we've got to cover. So if you want to see a book covered, please drop a sponsor stream or fire sale. If you want to sponsor a movie, send me $50 and I will cover your movie. Okay. We'll do a deep analysis of your movies. Fire sale. Fire sale. Fire sale. Send your $50 in now and we'll do your movies. Fire sale. Send your $50 in now. We'll do your movies. We'll do your movies. We'll do your movie analysis. And I've seen some good movies this week. Actually, I couldn't believe it because we know that it's, just trash coming out all the time. Little tangent here. Don't worry. We're going to come back to the novel. But I saw a movie this week that I really enjoyed. And I don't know, probably because it's a sort of end of the world loner survival disaster movie. And I like those. Also, I like Adam Driver. I don't know why I like Adam Driver, but I just always like Adam Driver movies. And it was this movie 65, which is basically the movie Prospect with what's his name? What's the name of the dude who plays the Mandalorian? It has that guy in it. That's what the movie Prospect is about, and it's a kind of a father-daughter survival on another planet stream, that's an underrated movie if you haven't seen that one. And it's also Oblivion. It's also it's like Oblivion with Tom Cruise, which is another great movie. The soundtrack to that movie is by M83, so I like that movie a lot. So it's kind of a combination of those, and it's called 65 because what happens is, just briefly, I'll just give an overview of the movie. So Adam Driver, it starts off and he's a dad and he's on a beach and he's talking to his daughter and it's just Earth, right? Then we see him in a spaceship and he is the pilot of a spaceship, kind of like the movie Passengers, right? Or Alien. Pedro Pascal. Thank you to Jethro the Kang in the chat with the names. So he's piloting these people who are in hypersleep and they're going to go to whatever planet. But what you learn, this is kind of cool, is that it's a little bit of Planet of the Apes here, is that we think that he's on Earth and he's going to another planet, but guess what? Panspermia. He's actually on another planet and he is headed for the planet Nibiru or whatever. And they get struck by an asteroid and they head off course. Spoiler alert. They get off course and they end up on an unnamed planet, and the unnamed planet we see is Earth. So it's called 65 because it's set 65 million years ago when the Dinobots ruled Gaia. So he crash lands. Everybody's dead in their hypersleep pods, except for a girl who's who's like his daughter's age. We find out that his daughter has passed away, and he's been looking at the digital chat, kind of like in the movie Moon. If you haven't seen that movie, that's a great movie by Duncan. What's David Bowie's real last name? Duncan Bowie. I don't know. That's a great movie with Sam Rockwell. And they always get this right. They're reading the tweets or whatever, or the digital imprint of the people from back home. We get this in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and we, all kinds of stuff. We see the messages from back home. But anyway, it turns out that his daughter gets sick and she dies, and that happens while he's gone, right? And so then this other girl who has parents, her parents die in the hypersleep pods, in the hypersleep coon pods, and now we have another father-daughter. Jones, thank you, Jethro, again. I should know that last name. I should have thought of that. No relation, folks. Um, but it was a good movie because although they're they're running away from lizard people. We did a lizard people stream. It would have been great if this movie had come out before the lizard people stream. They're running away from the lizard people, the reptilians, the Dinobots, and what's kind of it's a cool concept because the asteroid that hit him is the asteroid that is headed for 65 million year old Earth. So whatever. Just give it a give it a chance. It's a whatever, but it's a fun movie and they have this really good relationship. They're trying to survive and it was surprisingly um not sentimental but an emotional movie and it just got me. I don't know why. But it was really good and they have to survive and they have to get off the planet before the big asteroid makes the deep impact on Earth and get away. So that's why it's called that. So that was a good movie I watched. Also, I rewatched the movie Flight with Denzel Washington. I was telling Jethro about this. Um, and if you want to watch a good movie, honestly, if you want to watch a good movie, if you want to watch a solid movie, like the way, how Hollywood people are always saying movies are about telling stories. We're great storytellers, right? Well, if you want to watch a movie where they tell a great story and they have storytellers and it presents a moral conundrum, a moral quandary, a moral dilemma, then you should watch the movie Flight with Denzel. It is excellent. It is so good. You maybe you don't like it. Maybe you've seen it and you don't like it. Maybe you think it's whatever. You've seen the memes. I'm drunk right now. Remember? I'm drunk. I'm drunk right now. I had a drink yesterday and the day before that. I can't do a Denzel impression, but remember he says that. And then there's the meme of him drinking the vodka in the parking lot. Damn, what a good movie, dude. It is so good. It presents a good moral dilemma because it's I won't go too much into it, but he's a pilot and John Goodman John is one of John Goodman's best roles, honestly. John Goodman plays his dealer. He's this ponytailed boomer. Get in the Cocoa Puff. Come on, get in the Cocoa Puff. Um, and Denzel wakes up and he's in the hotel room across from the airport, and he's been getting freaky with one of the stewardesses. We find out, and he's got to wake up by doing a man. This guy, he likes to get twisted, right? He likes to get a little twisted, but he's an excellent Air Force pilot. And then anyway, he shows up. He sprays a little Banaka in his mouth. He gets in there. He manages to chug two little airplane bottles of vodka, and he's flying the plane. Now you think it's as simple as that, right? Well, it's not because my take here's my take on the movie. Hot take on the movie. He's right. He he did compromise his crew and the souls on board from his behavior. But it transcends that because it's also true that if he had to been there and done what he did, then everybody on the plane would have died because they prove in the hearings at the end of the movie that there was a jack screw that messed up the tail rudder and that the plane was diving straight down and crashed. Now I'm an expert in these sorts of things now because when I get home every day, I watch um, airplane disasters on the Boomer TV. So I'm an expert in all this. No, I'm not, but I do watch that, and it's based on a real story, and they actually did die, but they survive. But unfortunately, one of the people who dies on board is the woman that he was there with. And then spoiler again, at the end of the movie, it's presented that who drank these two bottles of vodka? Was it her? And this is great. This is great about the movie. It shows that laws and and expectations of behavior can sometimes um can many times, but especially in this instance where the two things come to a head, can take a, what do we say, a back seat because it's a plane, can take a coach seat to bigger things, which are ability and truth. And one of the great things about this is that Denzel is clearly an atheist in the movie. He's angry. He's an angry person, and that's part of his addiction in the movie. Um, but when it comes time for him to make his decision, for him for him when he comes to that line, right, when he's presented with that final line in the movie, he's got to cross that line, or he's got to stay on the other side of it. He decides this is the test. This is his test because he could fly. He could fly a plane, right? He can. He's the best pilot, and they did survive because of him. But he's not going to let the lady go down for the vodka when she in fact died trying to save this kid whose seatbelt broke, and she wasn't drinking that day. And they say that it was her because she'd been in rehab and all this stuff. But he says no, it wasn't her. She died saving the kid. It was and he admits it. It was him. And then at the end, he goes to the big house and he's got this great line about that the people that are listening to him in his meeting when he's at the Hooskow think that he might be stupid for saying this, but he says it's the first time he's ever been free in his life because he doesn't have to lie anymore. There's no more lies, and he leaves his lies behind. And so it's a powerful movie. It presents a lot of, it presents a true kind of moral dilemma. And I thought it was fantastic. It's very true to life. In terms of lots of the behavior in the movie, and I just thought it was extremely powerful. So that's Flight. Okay, so let's get on to. Sorry for that little tangent. I just thought I would throw that in there because why not? We can do that. We can do whatever we want. Um, so let's get on to Neil Gaiman's American Gods. Okay, so the book was published in 2001, and I don't really know anything about Neil Gaiman, but it doesn't matter. I don't have to. I know he's an English author, and that he moved to the United States in 1992, and that influenced his writing of the book because he was trying to get a handle on what America is. And I think that he does that in a few ways, but I have to say that I don't think that he has a handle on what America is. He does in some important ways, but he doesn't in terms of he sees everything from this he it's hard. I think it's hard for him, and he probably doesn't know this, to pierce below the surface into the subtext of what America is. So here's what the book is about. Uh, there's a guy named Shadow, and he wakes up in prison, and probably not the same prison Denzel is in Flight, but he wakes up in prison, and his wife has passed away. He gets he has to go and meet with the warden. He's got to go meet with the warden because his wife has died, and he's having these dreams, and he's like he's friends with this guy named Low Key something, and then obviously you're going to find out that Low Key is Loki. But when he gets out of jail, he's met by this guy named Mr. Wednesday. Mr. Wednesday in the TV show is played by Swearingen. And what's his face from John Wick, Ian McShane, who's great. He's great. But I mean, I watched like some of the first episode of the show, but I never really watched the show, so I can't really speak to that. But he meets with this guy, Mr. Wednesday, and we know because it's if you can figure this out pretty easily without any of the explanation that goes on for pages and pages. That Mr. Wednesday is another name for Odin. Okay, now he's Mr. Wednesday because that's the name he's going by in America, and that he's actually Odin because Wednesday comes from Wodan's Day or Wotan's Day, right? A Germanic term for Odin. And actually, he's not one of the things that's weird in this book is that he appears in like sort of three different guises as he goes through weird transformations in the movie, and that sort of fits with Norse mythology and even with Greek mythology because we talked about this in one of the other streams that the pantheon, the Greek gods and even the Norse gods like to disguise themselves as people in they have various disguises. And so but it's more than that. It's that he gives a backstory that um he's Odin and he's in Europe and he's with the Germans. But what happened is when the a bunch of Germanic explorers set sail, this is I guess it would be contemporary with Iceland, but maybe before. But it's not Leif Erikson. It's before that. Um, anyway, when they set sail, they ended up in Vinland, right, in America, and when they did that, Odin was on board. He was on the ship with them. So he went on this, exploration across the sea into the unknown, crossing the abyss in 2 ways. I mean, 1, literally, they're crossing over the abyss of the Atlantic Ocean, right? And 2, that they're crossing into the unknown abyss, and this is again what we get from Milton in Paradise Lost, right? This is the occult ritual, ritualized ceremony that we see for instance, in occult ceremonies like in Freemasonry, or in the Goetia, right, with Al Crowley, that you cross the abyss, face yourself. Al Crowley crosses over, beside Karanzan. He meets Karanzan and he crosses over to the other side. But the other side is the new world. So we get the new world. So he literally comes to the new world, but it's also a NWO, and he's setting up an NWO because the gods travel, okay, so that they can proliferate, they can go and they can move all about the globe and spread their worship. Now he says that later on also that the gods require worship by the people because the pagan gods require blood. They don't just need the prayers of the people, they need the blood and the blood sacrifice of people because that gives them a sort of energy. Now, of course, one of the big things that I hate about the book, obviously, is that there's like one mention of Christianity. I mean, they mention Jesus, and it's like, oh, everybody can have a Jesus, an everyday Jesus, and he says that Jesus is very popular in America, right? Well, and it's in a way that I don't like. It's obvious, you know, I don't know about Neil Gaiman, but I know that he's friends with Alan Moore and all this stuff. You can see a sort of a more graphic novel um, influence in this book, and I just thought it was lame. I just thought that was lame that he did that. It's like very, um, I don't know, surface level, very low IQ for him to say all this stuff. But I get it though, because what he's saying, he's trying to make a sort of a graphic novel of a novel. It's not a graphic. I don't know. Is this a graphic novel? I don't know. I don't really read graphic novels. Not there's anything wrong with them if you do, but that there's a clear differentiation between Christianity and the pagan gods in this story, and so that's one thing that Christianity does, right? Is that God does not require especially with Christ, does not require the blood sacrifice of people wherever they go. Um, and that's one thing that happens, like, with one of the West African gods that comes over, like, possesses, I think, a little girl and comes over, or when the Nordic people get over here, they find that America is, they say, like, friendly to people, but not friendly to gods because it's this vast wilderness, and it's this new place, and there's something about it, and they even sacrifice one of their own to Odin, but they end up leaving. It doesn't work. And so Christ sacrificed himself for all. We don't need to be sacrificing people when we go on our explorations to Antarctica or to Nibiru or whatever. You don't need to be doing that. But I get it. He's trying to create this sort of alternate world. One thing that I thought about this book was that because it came out in 2001, you can see its influence it is influential in the way that the new Pantheon is being promoted now, like with Marvel and all that. Right, because the superheroes are not just Ubermensch; they're supposed to be gods. I mean, essentially, they have all the trappings of pagan gods. And yes, that might be technocratic, and it might be transhumanist and, people becoming their own gods, which is, satanic. But it's all of that wrapped in one. And that comes after this book. Another thing that I saw randomly this week was that movie Samaritan with Sylvester Stallone, which is based in the story of Nemesis. It was another interesting movie. It was a pretty fun movie and it had heart. But it was whatever, but it was pretty good. But it's another thing that I saw is being like, I don't know if it's a conscientious acknowledgement of influence from this book from American Gods, but but I saw that as just an extension. of this book. It was just clearly just it was like another episode in the book. So anyway, so Shadow meets with Mr. Wednesday, who's Odin, and he's recruited to be his bodyguard. And they meet all sorts of other people. They there's a leprechaun. The leprechaun is not what you expect. One of the most interesting one of the most interesting people that you meet in the book is Sheba. And there's a really disturbing scene in the book where we see that I think it's Sheba. Sheba is all these gods are living in America. They're existing in America, and Sheba does what you would I don't know, I can see why he did this. It's like she they have this goddess who is living in the disguise of a prostitute like in LA. And there's a scene where she gets she hooks a John or whatever. And he comes back to her place and it's all red. It's the ruby red. She's the Scarlet Woman. She's dressed in red. And they're doing their business or whatever. But then she says to him like she asks him to worship her. And he says that he dedicates everything to her. And he worships her and he basically like sells himself to her, which is ironic because she was selling herself to him, but he's the one who's making the purchase, but really she's making the purchase because she's purchasing his soul. And while they're in the act, she like swallows him up into her being, which is really, I thought that was a pretty unique scene. That was really disturbing and pretty interesting. Um, Also, the book functions as a kind of, it functions kind of as an oubliette. Throw him in the oubliette. Remember in Labyrinth? It's like a maze. We have this character who's making his way through the maze of the world. So really, and there's a lot about dreams. So he's obviously, it's like it's surreal. So dreams and reality merge into one, and he makes his way through a sort of a surreal world. And um, where's the part about the oubliette here? I'm trying to find this. Let's see. Yeah, just early on in the book, on page 14 of this edition, it says, "Yeah, well, all I know is you fucking spooked me. Wilson had sandy blonde hair and sandy blonde face and a sandy blonde smile. You leaving us soon? Hope so, sir. You'll be back. I can see it in your eyes. You're a fuck up, Shadow. Now, if I had my way, none of you assholes would ever get out. We drop you in the hole and forget you." Oubliettes, thought Shadow, and he said nothing. It was a survival thing. He didn't answer back, didn't say anything about job security for prison guards, debate the nature of repentance, rehabilitation, or rates of recidivism. He didn't say anything funny or clever. And to be on the safe side, when he was talking to a prison official whenever possible, he didn't say anything at all. Speak when you're spoken to. Do your own time. Get out. Get home. Have a long hot bath. Tell Laura you love her. Rebuild a life. And that sets the kind of stage for the fact that his prison life. So what happens here is that okay, so Gaiman does a pretty clever thing here because he makes the protagonist begin the novel in a maze of his mind in an oubliette in a prison, in a literal prison. And then when he walks out of the prison, it's like he's walking out of Plato's cave into the world of forms and he's starting to see things as they really are in the world of the novel. And that's when he meets Odin. Okay. So Mr. Wednesday, and then Mr. Wednesday has to take him through another level of realizing what life is really like. And then they go to another level. And then at the end of the movie, at the end of the book, there's a scene where there's a really good scene at the end of the book where he is somewhere in I think Michigan, and this is after the war between the old gods and the new gods, which what occurs in the novel. And he's driving along, and then like he like falls under the ice. Now this is clever because we have literal and figurative meaning. We've got my light keeps messing up. We've got literal and figurative meaning. We've got surface level and subsurface, text and subtext. And obviously the way that we look at meaning and the way that we look at literature functions as the iceberg image, right? What you read on the surface is the words and the forms of the words and the the symbolism of the way that the words look on the page, but it's the way that you interpret the words and the way that you read between the lines, so to speak, into the deeper meaning of the book that is really the true function of art, right? And so when that's mirrored in a scene where you have a person who falls under the ice, then it's a double mirror because the ice also functions as a mirror. So when he's underneath the ice, he's looking up and he can see himself in the reflection of the ice, but he's actually underwater. So he's in the abyss. He's in the blackness of the water underneath the surface. And then when he's saved, he's saved out of this, and he comes out of the ice, but he's saved by this dude who he realizes this is really weird. He realizes that the guy he goes back to his house or whatever, and he realizes that the guy it's the guy he's essentially I guess he's Moloch, because he realizes it's the guy who has been a, let's say, creeper. He's a he's a John Wayne Gacy. We'll say that he's a John Wayne Gacy guy, and that he sees a vision of all of the KIDS that this guy has killed over the years, and that then he realizes that the guy owns like all of the land and the territory around the lake, and that the people have been allowed to exist there, and um they've had great land, and they've prospered because every year they've sacrificed one of their own to this Moloch guy. And it's really it's pretty eye-opening in the book because it's almost like when you get to that point in the book, you realize that you expected this of a novel like this, but it didn't happen, and now it's happening. Because why else is this guy messing around with all these weird pagan gods, right? They obviously require human sacrifice, and we know what all that means. And then now here it is. So then he's like, the guy's like, "Are you going to kill me?" Because the pagan gods get killed in a sense in the book, but they just transform into kind of another dimension, which happens to Odin. So Odin, by the way, Odin is Mr. Wednesday, and before that he was Odin, and then later on he's in the book he is like a kind of a vaporized voice version of Odin, and then later on he's going to be something else. And that's kind of like how there's a scene where Shadow, the protagonist, he's made a deal with Mr. Wednesday. Basically, Mr. Wednesday says, like, you have to do what I ask, and if I die, you have to hold my vigil. Well, he dies, and then so he has to be true to his word, and he has to hold his vigil. So what that means is that he has to tie himself to Yggdrasil, which is the Nordic world tree. And the world tree, remember, is supposed to be a kind of a it's like an inverted knockoff version of the tree of life and even of the cross, because what happens with Yggdrasil, this is one of the things with the pagans, right? And I know everybody here knows this, but um, with pagan conversion, one of the things supposedly or in history that converted them was that they had Odin, and Odin is the All Father, and so when they were being converted, they said, "Oh, well, that's the All Father, but there's God. God the Father is the actual Father." That's easy for them to convert because when Odin becomes God, he and what he gives to humanity in their pantheon is he hangs upside down from Yggdrasil for 9 days. Okay, so it's instead of 3 days, it's 9 days, and he hangs upside down. So instead of hanging right side up on the cross, he's hanging inverted. And then when he does that, and this is what Shadow goes through in the vigil. He binds himself to Yggdrasil, and there's three layers of Yggdrasil, right? There's Asgard, and then there's the Middle Earth, right, or Mid Earth, or whatever. Think J.R. Tolkien, and so he's in a way he's like crucified on the tree in a way, but he's upside down. And when he does that, he goes into another sort of dimension at the bottom of the world, and at the bottom of the world, he sees a pool. This is Nordic mythology, and in the pool, he sees runes floating. He doesn't know what they are at first, and they're symbols, but they're runes. And so he gives his left eye, right? Illuminate, confirm. He takes the runes in a bag, in a rattle bag, and he brings them up to Earth, and then he gives them to humanity, and that gives humanity language. And runes function as a few different things in Nordic mythology. I mean, I know this because my book of poems in grad school is called Runes, um, because that ties in with the way that the megalomania in World War II and Imperial Rome and the runes function as poetic symbols. But in the Icelandic sagas, runes function as they're not only individual letters and marks, but they're like magic. Each one holds a magical potency. And when they're arranged in a certain way, they cast spells. So in Egil saga, in the Icelandic sagas, somebody is lying in bed and they have some sort of unknown sickness. And one thing that the way that he is solves it is he goes to their house, looks under their pillow, and somebody has put a whalebone with runes carved on it. And he says that they knowingly inverted the runic structure of the sentence to cause their blood to flow backwards because everything is it's sort of backmasked. So he writes it and he puts it under their pillow, and then it's like a magic spell to counter the bad spell. So runes focus as magic, as language, but also as poetry. There's a poetic potency to the runic language and to the Germanic language that is inherent in all of the Eddas and the Icelandic sagas and old Anglo-Saxon literature that is kind of lost in our understanding of nature. I mean, our understanding of language now. But actually, you could probably see that has come to be now through code, right? It's the same way that um, there was that story about Elon Musk this week, and they said that they found the list of certain words from 2012, and that Musk said, "Oh, we don't know about this. We're gonna see what we're gonna do about this." But that's language. It's language. There's a part of a code that's inserted, part of language that's inserted into the language code, and depending on how it's used, it can mess everything up. It can run awry, it can cause bugs, or it can make everything function correctly. Right. So that's sort of how runic language or old Germanic language, or even with Greek, can change can make its way into the way that we understand language and the way that things function today. So so what we see that a couple of things we get from that, right? It's kind of mirrors number one, Prometheus and Epimetheus. It mirrors Prometheus like giving fire to human beings. It mirrors the story of the garden with, you know, Prometheus is just Satan, right? So the statue of Prometheus in front of Rock Center is just a statue of Lucifer burning. But it mirrors the way that we think about Prometheus giving fire, or Satan going into the garden telling Adam and Eve that they can live as gods, or Odin going in on Yggdrasil, hanging upside down, getting things and giving them humanity. But it's also an inversion of Christ, crucified on the cross and giving salvation to human beings. So that's how they are able to make their way around that. Um, so that's a pretty interesting thing. One thing about the book is when I'm kind of going all over the place with the narrative, because the narrative does that. It goes all over the place. We have the story of Shadow, and he's making his way through, and then eventually there's going to be a clash between the old gods and the new gods. But they're like the clash, the war is like a small part of the book, and it doesn't really provide a climax, or at least it didn't for me. And also, um, there are backstories that are tied into this. And I know that what Neil Gaiman is trying to do here is he's trying to, he said something about like the best way to tell a story is to tell the story, not talk about the story. So that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to come up with a new mythology, or the past is prologue. I can admire this. He's trying to use old mythology to create sort of a new mythology that's a story for the story of America, but it just doesn't seem to work for me. And I don't mean like work for me, like, oh, I have to be pleased by the novel. I understand why he's doing these things. I just mean that there's something missing in his piece of what America is, and not in the way that, oh, he's English and he doesn't understand America. It's not that. It's something more. And I think maybe that's because maybe that is the reason for that is because the protagonist Shadow is a shadow of himself, right? So like we said, he starts off in the prison, he ends up under the ice sheet, and then he walks out of Plato's cave and he goes out into the world. And then at the end of the movie, by the way, he walks into the sunset, which is a great um which is like a great, sort of American trope, right? Of the old West, walking into the West, walking into the sunset. But um the problem is that if you're going to do that with characters, then the shadow of the true self, if this is a Jungian thing, then the true self has to be compelling. There has to be enough substance to have a shadow. And there really isn't. There isn't enough substance in the real shadow to get hooked into the story. Like we get to a point in the book where we care so much, we start to care about characters and then they disappear. And now, okay, so let me justify that. Maybe maybe he does that because I got to put on my hat. I like wearing a hat. So what? It's like Peter Griffin wants to go to the hat store all the time. I like wearing a hat. So what? Um, so maybe that's because maybe I'll put my hat on backwards. How about that? I got my lacrosse tape on there. So whatever. Um, maybe the reason that the there's something missing from the character and the way that he's always searching is supposed to be a metaphor for how Americans are searching. America's built on like a search for something else. It's the new world, right? You're making a new world. All these people come to it, including the gods in this book. Maybe it's Shadow searching for his true self. Maybe he's searching for his other self, which would be his wife that died. He's searching for purpose, but he never finds it. So it's kind of an incomplete story. Also, consider this. Maybe that's because the gods are incomplete in the lives of human beings. They're never there when you want them there in the book, right? Um, think about the way that King Lear talks about the gods. Remember we did our King Lear speech, King Lear analysis? King Lear says, "We are but playthings to the gods. They kill us for their sport." Right? You imagine remember that old movie, um, of Clash of the Titans where you have, like was that Laurence Olivier? You have Laurence Olivier and, like, we see the gods on Olympus, and there's, like, a play set, and they're playing with pieces of clay. So, when, like, we'll have, I don't know, the Perseus toy, like or Theseus, like, jumps on this character and squashes it, and then we cut to the real life version, and that's what's happening in real life. So, in other words, they're manipulating human beings like puppet masters. And yeah, maybe that's accurate in terms of the pantheon of gods, of pagan gods just being demons, or the fact that, there's no free will in any of these things. It's always fate, right? Especially in Nordic mythology, it's fate. I mean, we see the clear difference between fate and free will in Beowulf, for example, or in the Icelandic sagas, or in some of the narrative poems of the Anglo-Saxon period. I did a stream early on in this channel where we talked about the seafarer, right? And many scholars think that those works are like they were written by a bard or a scop or a pagan, a pagan poet, and then they were picked up later by monks and they were added to, or there was an addendum. So there's a part that's pagan, it's about fate, and then there's a part that's about free will that's a Christian monk adding to it. And that might be the case in some instances, but I my thoughts about that is that are that it's clear in the poems that they were written by a single author. They were written by a single poet who just exists in a time when the the pull of the recent past of paganism was still strong in the culture of these people, because they were newly Christianized. I mean, Iceland, remember Iceland Christianized all at once as a rule. They were meeting at the All thing in the year 1000 and they decided to Christianize. So imagine if you're living in that time and you're just some guy or whatever, right? And you were pagan for 20 years and then now you're Christian. I mean, that probably happens now, right? So the pull seems to be strong in terms of the dual nature of people. And that, you know what, that kind of speaks to the complexity of human beings, how people are able to hold two different views and sort of try and make them make sense with each other. I was talking to a friend this week about Jack Kerouac, and Jack Kerouac is a good example that seems to be have nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it is a good example of this in terms of Kerouac was raised Catholic, but he had like strong influences in reading in Buddhism, and then he ended up creating sort of this kind of weird amalgamation theology where he's searching for truth by trying to create a middle ground between the two. Of course, you know, mm, b- the Buddhist part doesn't really do anything for him except in terms of, I guess, his sort of Zen way of living in terms of his own worldview, like what he thinks about himself. But still, I mean, in a kind of I don't know, not a very serious way. It would be the way that, for instance, about myself, that like I completely disagree and do not like any of the things that like Madonna likes. Okay, that I don't like anything about her. Same with like if you went to a Playboy Cardi concert, it's like you know flashing Satan on the screen, right? And there's just The Weekend and Playboy Cardi and Madonna are all three people that I have I feel kind of repugnance. But they put out a song this week, those three people, and it's called Celebrity. And like I listen to the song and I'm like, damn, I like this song. I like Playboy Cardi songs. So that's because I'm able to like the music without buying into whatever his thing is or whatever the thing is in the song. I mean, the lyrics to the song are crazy. The lyrics to the song are like it says something about like, oh, you would kill someone, you would sell your soul to get to be popular, right? It's about popularity. I think the song's called Popular. And even the title of the song, I was like, I'm gonna hate this song because it's called Popular. What is this like? This is like a pop punk band talking about popularity. So whatever. But yet, I like the song. It's probably just because of the synths. It's because of the synthesizers that I like the song. But I like the song and I like the tune and I can appreciate the music without buying into any of it. I just like the song. That's it. I don't care. All the rest of it I know is just shit. But but I still dig the song. Does that make sense? So in other words, like people are complex and they like things that they ordinarily wouldn't like, or that their logical mind or their deep beliefs tell them they wouldn't ordinarily like, but they can still like the. I mean, look, like you know, I know that Red Bull is not good for you, right? And I hate everything that those companies stand for and I hate all that stuff, but I still like drinking Red Bull. No, not that that's virtuous or anything. I'm just saying maybe that's not a great example. I don't know. Please like and share the stream, you guys. Thank you for being here on this Saturday night. And please share the stream, share the stream out. And if you want to support me again, hit the links right there in the chat or in the video description. PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Dono Chat, Super Chats. I really appreciate all of your support, and we can always use it, folks. We need it. We need to keep the channel going. We got stuff. Okay, so thank you so much. Jethro says that's how I am with Slayer. Perfect example, right? Um, that I think a lot of dudes, especially like in our sort of circles, like heavy metal, for example, and everything about it that you would think would be repugnant to them, and yet they like the music and they like they like the energy of it or whatever. They like the tunes or they like you like the music, and that's fine. You don't have to be. You're not the one making the music. You're not worshiping the music. You just like the music, right? so um so so what else about this book? Okay, there's one part where I'm going to read some excerpts from the book because there are some parts that are pretty good. I'm going to read that part at the end, and then their backstories, and then there's the part about hanging from Yggdrasil that's great. Um, there are characters that I just got nothing from in this. Some of the gods that they talk about that are gone. I mean, they go into Egyptian mythology, and Anubis shows up, and Horus, um, and they're seen as sort of the gateways to death, because when the characters die, they end up in the Egyptian underworld, and then their soul, or rather their heart, is weighed against a feather, and then they're judged, and either their soul is going to be eaten or they're going to go into the other place. But that's sort of one of the things that another one of the things that I don't like about Neil Gaiman is that he does this thing that a lot of authors do when I think maybe it's the editor telling them to do this, but it's like they make a great point and they show us the images and they show us the work and we get it. And then they explain what they just told us. So don't show us the Egyptian underworld and um the heart being weighed on the scales against a feather, and then explain what it means. You don't need to do that, right? Yeah, Tolkien says they are the undertakers. Yep. So let's go to page 76 in this book right here. It says, every hour wounds, the last one kills. That reminds me of Apocalypse Now Redux. Remember, there are two of you, one that loves and one that kills. Where had he heard that? He could no longer remember. He could feel somewhere deep inside him anger and pain building, a knot of tension at the base of his skull, a tightness at the temples. He breathed in through his nose, out through his mouth, forcing himself to let the tension go. He thought of Wednesday's comment and smiled despite himself. Shadow had heard too many people telling each other not to repress their feelings, to let their emotions out, let the pain go. Shadow thought there was a lot to be said for bottling up emotions. If you did it long enough and deep enough, he suspected pretty soon you wouldn't feel anything at all. Sleep took him then, without Shadow noticing. He was walking. He was walking through a room bigger than a city, and everywhere he looked, there were statues and carvings and rough-hewn images. He was standing beside a statue of a woman-like thing. Her naked breasts hung flat and pendulous on her chest. Around her waist was a chain of severed hands. Both of her hands held sharp knives, and instead of a head rising from her neck, there were twin serpents, their bodies arched, facing each other, ready to attack. There was something profoundly disturbing about the statue, a deep and violent wrongness. See that sentence right there? You don't need to tell us that, dude. Why did you do that? Why did you do that? Why would he do that? He just gave us all of that imagery, and then he told us there was something profoundly disturbing about the statue. We got that. What that pisses me off. Why would you do that, dude? You just showed us something profoundly disturbing. You don't need to tell us that it's profoundly disturbing. We're not dum-dums. We get it. When you see a woman with her breasts hanging to her waist and she's got knives and all these hands and there's twin serpents instead of a head, that's disturbing. Sorry. Shadow backed away from it. He began to walk through the hall. The carved eyes of those statues that had eyes seemed to follow in his every step. In his dream, he realized that each statue had a name burning on the floor in front of it. The man with the white hair with the necklace of teeth about his neck, holding a drum, was Leucosios. The broad hipped woman with monsters dropping from the vast gash between her legs was Habor. The ram headed man holding the golden ball was Hershef. A precise voice, fussy and exact, was speaking to him in his dream, but he could see no one. These are gods who have been forgotten and now might as well be dead. They can be found only in dry histories. They're gone, all gone, but their names and their images remain with us. Shadow turned a corner and knew himself to be in another room even vaster than the first. It went on further than the eye could see. Close to him was the skull of a mammoth, polished and brown, and a hairy ochre cloak being worn by a small woman with a deformed left hand. Next to that were three women, each carved from the same granite boulder, joined at the waist. Their faces had an unfinished hasty look to them, although their breasts and genitalia had been carved with elaborate care, and there was a flightless bird which Shadow did not recognize, twice his height, with a beak made for rending like a vulture's, but with human arms, and on and on. The voice spoke once more as if it were addressing a class, saying, "These are the gods who have passed out of memory. Even their names are lost. The people who worship them are as forgotten as their gods. Their totems are long since broken and cast down. Their last priest died without passing on their secrets. So this is where he's talking about, um, it does sound like Kali. This is where he's talking about how pantheon of Roman of not Roman of all the pagan gods die, which is which is an interesting concept, an interesting and ironic concept, right? Now, um, Christ um, died, was buried, and was resurrected, right? And Christ lives forever. Christ is the king. Christ is the king of the universe over all these friggin' serpent-headed demon people, these demon gods, right? But again, it's like you don't need to tell us that he didn't need to tell us all this stuff. In fact, he could have just answered all this by just saying the line about the totem, right? Their totems are long since broken and cast down. In fact, that one sentence probably would have sufficed for that whole previous paragraph. We don't need to the descriptions of the gods and what's happened to them, is enough for us to understand. I mean, this is why Ernest Hemingway is so good, right, with ellipsis, because he understands that the reader has to buy into the novel, into the work, and has to have a kind of literary IQ high enough to understand that some things are unspoken, even in a medium where everything is spoken, right? Because that's how life is, right? We don't get all the answers. Not we don't when you ask someone, you ask your friend a question, they don't need to respond to you in words. Sometimes they can respond with body language. And in this, it's like we can get what happens by the later after symbol of the cast down and broken totem. In fact, even change the whole syntax of the sentence. So I know I'm not trying to rewrite the book. I'm just saying if it were a poem, maybe it would be easier. Not easy. It would actually be more difficult, but it would be more effective. And in fact, I think one of the reasons for the length of this text, it's obviously the length of the text is supposed to mimic the Eddas, and it's supposed to mimic, you know, um, it's supposed to mimic the kind of exploration that we get in the ancient, in the old Germanic texts, or even in any of the pagan texts. It's long. It's supposed to be long. In fact, there's a postscript. The book has an afterword, a postscript, another postscript. It keeps going, right? Yeah, Kit says in chat we got to get by with emojis. I mean, well, yeah, right. Good example. We don't. Not everything needs to be told. You can be shown some things. Um, let's go to another part here. He says, he meets the fair. Oh, one of the characters that I did mention was the Slavic god, Chernobog, which is interesting because Chernobog also is the one who pops. Chernobog is the dragon, Satan, demon character in Fantasia in that scene in Fantasia that if you saw it when you were young, I mean, I remember seeing that in the theater when I was very young, and that oh, we're gonna go to a Disney movie, and then we watch Fantasia, and it's got Chernobog with all the demons swirling around the castle, and it shows you that like it's weird because it does show you that the dragon sits on the castle, it hovers over the castle, and it enfolds the castle in its dark wings, and so anyway, Chernobog is one of the characters in this. Um, and also, there was a lot in that passage I just read that reminded me of Steppenwolf. We did an analysis of Steppenwolf. Herman Hesse's Steppenwolf. Remember, please go back and watch that. In fact, I got a good comment on that today. Somebody had come here from Boiler Room and was checking out Steppenwolf. So go back and check out our analysis because just like in Mask of the Red Death or in Steppenwolf, the character goes through goes through a series of rooms, of multicolored rooms, each as a kind of archetype that focus on stages of life or the afterlife. And from that he's supposed to emerge, newly illuminated, a new person. just like shadow does coming into the that's why he's called shadow and he comes into the light, right? Or shadow arising from prison or rising out of the ice. There's also it also because it has the Danse Macabre. You guys remember that band, Dance Macabre? Um, and it's kind of he mentions the Mikado here. It says on page 156, they went further in down a red corridor past rooms with empty chairs upon which rested violins and violas and cellos, which played themselves or seemed to when fed a coin. Keys depressed, cymbals crashed, pipes blew compressed air into clarinets and oboes. Shadow observed with a wry amusement that the bows of the stringed instruments played by mechanical arms never eventually touched the strings, which were often loose or missing. He wondered whether all the sounds he heard were made by wind and percussion or whether there were tapes as well. They had walked for what felt like several miles when they came to a room called the Mikado, one wall of which was a 19th century pseudo Oriental nightmare in which a beetle browed mechanical drummer banged cymbals and drums while staring out from their dragon encrusted lair. Currently, they were majestically torturing uh, Saint Saints Dance Macabre. Chernobog sat on a bench in the wall facing the Mikado machine, tapping out the time with his fingers. Pipes fluted, bells jangled. Now that's that's also an image that we get in a lot of blatantly satanic literature and music where you get you get the panpipe or the pan figure. And you remember in the two examples of this from contemporary art are one is great. Both of these are great. They came out kind of at the same time. Hereditary and The Witch both have an incredible attention to detail in how they present their demons. Okay. And the reason for that is that, or the way that happens is that Hereditary, there's one thing that's subtle about the movie. It actually might not be very subtle, I guess, if you're paying attention. But you remember when Paimon appears at the end of the film, and Paimon is now the demon Paimon. It comes on the upper wind out of the like northwest. That's why the grandmother has the triangle painted on her floor of her bedroom, right? That they can't go into, and she's got sigils painted. And the one leg of the bed is inside of the triangle. You remember that? The triangle is facing out the open window, and out the open window, of course, we get we get the weird treehouse. And one thing that's interesting about the treehouse in Hereditary is that the treehouse is floating. There's no like there's a ladder that comes down, a kind of a dream ladder, but there's no like steps or like permanent ladder that you see. It's almost like you have to float up into this place to get there. So that's part of the occult ritual in the movie. And that when finally it's also one leg of the bed is in the triangle because it shows that like she's not in protecting herself inside the magic circle that they always talk about, and it's not a circle, it's a triangle because it's pointed towards Paimon and the wind, who's a demon of the wind, and the wind has to float the demon through the air to possess the kid, and they have to float up into the treehouse. Um, but also that even when she sleeps and in her dreams, she's inside the circle or inside the sort of pyramid and outside of it. So she's between two worlds, and that's where the demon is in Hereditary, right? But it's like the demon is the electrical charge going through the school, and then it's possessing the boy, and it's so it's between two worlds. But also at the end of the movie, when he ascends, he's descending, right? It's because it's inverted. It's a double inversion. So he's ascending, but he's really descending, and he's descending, but he's ascending. So the demon is ascending, but also descending to them, but also they're going to descend because they're going to go to hell. But when the demon is possessed the boy and ascends up into the treehouse, you remember what it sounds like. You when they go in and he sees all the headless people bowing to the statue of Paimon, you hear bells. You hear this bell music. And one thing about Paimon and some of the pantheon of the demons and the princes of hell is like this sound of bells, right? That it's supposed to be a hypnotic physical gesture. It's a physical gesture of the kind of hypnotic takeover of people that willingly walk into this, right? And they do the same thing in the witch. So there's the scene in the witch, dost thou like the taste of butter? What does he say? He says, dost thou like the taste of butter? Pretty clothes. Wouldst thou like to live fergaliciously? So we see Black Phillip. That's the best scene in the movie. It's so well done. I mean, yes, it's demonic. The story's demonic, but what happens is we see the girl. She's gone through her ritual trauma. She's sitting at the table. We see the one leg of Black Phillip appear behind her, and then the next step is a man's leg rising up like he's walking off of all fours onto two legs. And what do you hear? Bells. Because that's the sound of Lucifer in the guise of Black Phillip appearing to make her write her name in his black book of death. Wouldst thou like to live fergaliciously? Uh, so anyway, that sort of ties into this book in terms of the bells and the bell sounds. We also get the jinn. We get great descriptions of the jinn, and he's pretty faithful to the original text and the original descriptions of some of these demons. We get one thing that was interesting was on page 266. I thought that was pretty something kind of revelatory here. Maybe Gaiman knows this. He says, it's page 267 says there was a small stack. There's a small stack of Reader's Digests on the little table beside the bed. None of them dated later than March 1960. Jackson, the library guy, the same one who had sworn to the truth of the Kentucky Fried Mutant Chicken creature story, who had told him the story of the black freight trains that the government uses to haul political prisoners off to secret Northern Californian concentration camps, moving across country in the dead of night. Jackson had told him that the CIA used Reader's Digest as a front for their branch offices around the world. He said that every Reader's Digest office in every country was really CIA. A joke, said the late Mr. Wood in Shadow's memory. How can we be sure the CIA wasn't involved in the big 1963 event? Shadow cracked the window open a few inches, enough for fresh air to get in, enough for the cat to be able to get out onto the balcony outside. So I thought that was interesting, and you know what? He's probably right. Uh, I don't know if he has any sort of insight or not. I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna like spurg about like his game in CIA or something. Maybe he is. I mean, this is we talked about how this is culture creation, how this sort of leads the way towards the Marvel universe, or at least it sort of foreshadows it. Whoa, the character's named Shadow, and it's foreshadowing the Marvel universe. It's foreshadowing the insidious attempt to take over the minds and souls of the normies by making them have their faith in comic book characters and demigods, and sort of transhumanist demon people rather than stay true to their faith. I don't know. I don't know. I think that it makes sense that Reader's Digest would function as that because we know that CIA. I mean, we just did Condor, right? Condor is about that. Condor, 3 Days of the Condor, 6 Days of Condor, the book is about a character who works in an editing publication office and who scours all published material and sends it um, in fax documents over to CIA for analysis to see that if it is too close to anything truthful or if it's somehow revealing something, revealing the plan, right? That's what it's about. And it would make sense that Reader's Digest would do this because also remember how CIA and this was part of this was also part of the Robert Redford CIA trilogy stream. Well, one thing they do in the movie Spy Game is when he's teaching Brad Pitt spycraft, he goes about showing him. We've seen this in a bunch of movies and texts that CIA puts messages for meetings. They did this especially like during the Cold War. They put messages for meetings on literal bulletin boards or message boards and in public places or in published materials. So therefore, the agent knows that on, January, I'm not going to give a date. Look in Reader's Digest on page 322 Paragraph 3, word 22, and that will be your cipher for where the dead drop will take place. Right? That's how they get that. And that would make sense that it would do that. I mean, have you guys ever read a Reader's Digest? Like, I read Reader's Digest. My grandmother had a subscription, and of course, I read anything, but I would read that. I read the HBO monthly. I would read back to front and back again the monthly HBO schedule of movies back in the 80s and 90s. Uh, I read I never really read TV Guide. I never really, we didn't nobody I never knew ever had a TV Guide, but if I had a TV Guide, I would have read that. I read the back of a toothpaste label. But Reader's Digest did publish books. They had a great series of published books. The first time I ever saw a copy of Moby Dick, it was a Reader's Digest publication of it. Back when I was, like 7. So yeah, but it would make sense that it would function as that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Um, Also, there's some weird things about the stabby in here that kind of predict the stabby, and they sort of go in line with um, some of the drug addiction elements of the book because there are elements of morphine and heroin and other organized crime and trafficking things that happen in this because, of course, Mr. Wednesday is involved in organized crime, and because he lives, get it, because and it makes sense. This is kind of clever. Mr. Wednesday, Odin, is the head of an organized crime um, family, I guess, because organized crime is the underworld. And so Odin functions as the underworld in the overworld. It's a double underworld, if that makes sense. So I thought that was kind of clever and unique. Um, the one of the epigraphs to the book, which is probably the speaks for what the whole book is, he says on page 361, he repeats this on page 361. Says the man in the light gray suit, when his drink arrives, the finest line of poetry ever uttered in the history of this whole damn country. Interesting. He says damn country like it's damned. And I know he had to have meant that um, as a clever pun here because of the gods ruling over the country. He says, the whole damn country was said by Canada Bill Jones in 1853 in Baton Rouge while he was being robbed blind in a crooked game of Pharaoh. Remember Doc Holliday plays Pharaoh in Tombstone? I don't gamble. I play poker. Fair. Only gamblers buck the odds. The odds always on the house. He says, um, George Devil, like devil, but Devol, who was like Canada Bill, not a man who was averse to fleecing the odd sucker, threw Bill aside and asked him if he couldn't see that the game was crooked. And Canada Bill sighed and shrugged his shoulders and said, "I know, but it's the only game in town." And he went back to the game. He says that's the finest line of poetry ever uttered by an American, and that is pretty insightful. We know the game is crooked, but it's the only game in town. So that speaks to the political system or the way that people buy into the political system. And it speaks to sort of the way that the hodgepodge and the melting pot of America works and the power structure. So that's pretty clever. I thought that was clever. I don't know. And I get what he means by it being poetry there. It's a line of succinct truth. Um, Trying to find some other passages. Karunka. Karunka is the Karunka passage is page 498. He says, I believe that California is going to sink into the sea, and when the big one comes, while Florida is going to dissolve into madness and alligators and toxic waste. I believe that antibacterial soap is destroying our resistance to dirt and disease so that one day we'll all be wiped out by the common cold like the Martians in War of the Worlds. So, is that predicting Karanka? At least it's hitting on one thing that happened during Karanka. It sort of hits on the way that I mean, that's also H.G. Wells and War of the Worlds, and obviously, Wells, as one of the Anglo-American group, one of the planners, is responsible for that in the first place. But it is interesting, like when you the way that the game is crooked, people buy into it, and it's like when you think about something like Kinscancer. Kinscancer seems to be prevented by putting banana boat zinc on your skin, right? But is it the bee boat that's causing the Kinscancer in the first place? Who knows? I don't know, but it seems like that would be a thing, right? Because, you know, human beings like live outside in the sun and have done so since the beginning of human beings. Um, right? Since Adam and Eve and since the fall, and you live outside, and all of a sudden it's the ozone and the hole caused by Gil Bates that are giving you this, and then the only way to cure it is to put on the very product that Gil Bates makes. Seems interesting, right? When was this written? It was published in 2001. So Big Nine. It's a Big Nine book. Um. Oh, there was a big synchro on page 599 because he was talking about neither path is safe. He says basically it's like I'll take the high road, you take the low road, and I'll get there the faster by, which is a sort of a Ulster Scots proverb, but is remember we were talking about that with Bob Dylan and how it was Bob Dylan's verse. There's a verse in a Bob Dylan song that we covered last week where he talks about um that both roads take you to the wrong place. You go the left way, I'll go the right way, but both roads are wrong. And how that was sort of a mimicry of the psychotic Robert Frost poem, right? Two roads diverge in the yellow wood. That I took the one less traveled by. But it doesn't matter because with Bob Dylan, both roads are wrong. Well, it says the same thing here on page 599. I thought that was an interesting element that came out of nowhere. That was pretty synchro. Um, let's see. The reason that Odin is in America is on pages 674, starts on 674. And it says, oh yeah, so he calls him the Judas goat. Um says they killed me, said Wednesday from the shadows. None of this would have worked if they hadn't. So in other words, we find out that Shadow is a kind of demigod and that this whole narrative has been puppeteered by Odin in the guise of Mr. Wednesday so that it's a long con. There's a lot there are many elements of the Confidence Man in this because we have a whole cast of characters on this kind of ship of fools who are moving towards ultimate destruction and Ragnarok. And so the whole thing is set in motion so that Odin can die or go through a kind of death, and that a kind of Ragnarok will happen with the new gods. And the new gods in America are like media and the technocracy and technical boy, etc. Big media, and they fight like in the middle ground in. I think they're in Tennessee. I think they're in Tennessee. There are big sections of the book in Tennessee. They go all over. It's an American. I mean, it's kind of an American Odyssey, and that also makes sense because the Odyssey is a book about a guy escaping from the Trojan War, trying to get back home to his wife, and meanwhile being put through the trials and tribulations of the gods as a kind of an archetypal journey for truth, mirroring what life is supposed to be to the Greek mind. And so this is the same thing because Shadow is coming out of a war, but it's a war with himself for which he's been sentenced to prison. The prison is the kind of the battleground, and then he's got to make his way back to his wife. He's trying to get back to his wife the whole book, even though his wife has passed away, and he has a constant yearning for his other half. And again, he's put through this kind of Ragnarok, and then he's forced to hold vigil for Wednesday and sacrifice himself, through which he is reborn, by the way, through a character called Easter. This part really pissed me off because it's just another one of these examples of where they go, "Oh, did you know Easter comes from," and it's like Ishtar. Like, dude, give me a break, man, with this stuff. So, but he is reborn through Easter, and I guess, at least it's the word Easter, and we're talking about um resurrection and rebirth, and so it's a character who's reborn, and then he goes out and figures out his life how it's supposed to be. I seem to be very mad about this book, but I'm not. I'm just I'm passionate about my about my criticism, my critical analysis, I guess. And so anyway, that's the book. That's probably enough about American Gods. That's Neil Gaiman's American Gods. And check it out. I mean, listen, you might like it. I'm not here to recommend books or not, but it might be something you would check out. Um, and if you're into a grand mythological scape, then maybe that's something for you. But in order to understand that, I would say maybe you should check out at least or the Odyssey, the Iliad, or the Aeneid as prerequisites for this book. In order to understand something contemporary, you should go back to the past and read those. You could read the Icelandic sagas. And I'm not saying, I mean, yes, those are canon works and they're classical works, classic and classical works, but they also are just a different branch of what he's doing in this book. So, before you get to this book, maybe you could read those. I don't know. Um, Briefly, I wanted to discuss one other or two other works. And before I do that, let's give some shouts out here because some people have supported me in the stream, and I thank you so much. One is our homeboy Jason Skull, who's always supporting me. He sends $10 via PayPal. Thank you, Jason. Yo, Joe McGrath. Joe McGrath sent me $20. Um, Sorry, I should not give last names. Hope I didn't. I meant uh Joseph. Okay, thanks to Joe. Thanks to Joe. I'm sorry, slow boy here. Thanks to Joe. Shouts out to Slowboy Whiteboard. Thanks to Joe for sending in that $20 on Venmo. It says great content. Hey, thanks, Joe. Really appreciate you. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Really support that big Venmo. That's great. Thank you so much. Yo, shouts out to our homeboy Evan out there who sends $20 on PayPal. That was great. Thank you so much. Big support. Big support from you two guys and from Jason. Yo, shouts out to Jonathan who says for best concept was the new gods them $5 for best concept was the new gods themselves like tech. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you, Jonathan. Thank you for that $5 cash app. Yo, shouts out to Max out there who sends $10 via Venmo. And thank you so much, Max. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Hey, y'all, thank you so much for supporting me. Really, really appreciate you. That means a lot. Hey, look at that. Big time super chat coming in from our homie Nom de Plume, who sponsored this stream. Love the passion in your critical analysis. Thanks so much for doing this one. Really enjoyed it. God bless you, BLA. Hey, thank you, Nom de Plume. Really, really appreciate that. That means a lot. Not only that you took the time to send in your hard-earned bucks, but that you already sent them in for sponsoring this stream. So thank you so much, Nom de Plume and Max and Jonathan, Jason and Joe and Evan, of course. And thank you so much. Listen, there's still time to send in super chats and support me. And also, I'm really seriously pushing the sponsored streams because they help me out so much, obviously. And I think that people enjoy them. You guys give good recommendations. We've done a bunch of sponsored streams here, and some of them have turned out to be so good. I mean, our own, the biggest one of my favorite ones that we did, of course, was from my very good friend Jethro, who is the Kang here and who's great. But remember, it was Jethro's idea to do No Country from Old Men, Cormac McCarthy back in the day. It was almost a year ago, and that one was huge, and I'm really was happy with that one. So look, if you want me to cover a book, please consider dropping me, some fat bucks on one of those three: Cash App, PayPal, Venmo. I ask those because they get to me soonest, and then I can get the books. And give me some ideas. We still got a bunch of stuff to cover coming up from people who've sponsored streams from various literary works. We've also got some movies coming up. I mean, Amptown sponsored a movie that I'm working on, or that DPH and I have talked about that. So listen again, fire sale. If you want me to do, how about this? If you want me to do a movie, send me $20 in a sponsor stream, and I will do your movie. Give me a list. Give me a list quick. Give me a list quick. Give me a quick list. Give me $20. Give me a quick list, and I will do your movie analysis. Fire sale. Because I love watching movies, and we do movie analysis here. And also, it's great when we do a movie analysis based on books. And at the very least, we can do a screenplay. We can look at the screenplay of that. Norma Plume says 100% redo of the Odyssey. Not as good, obviously, but no one modern can touch the classic. That's absolutely true. And of course, the Odyssey is one of the great. I mean, the Odyssey is one of the foundations of literature in the first place. The Odyssey and the Iliad. Oftentimes, people look over. Maybe we need to do the Iliad, because people look over the Iliad and they go for the Odyssey. And that's good. That's fine, because it's a two sides and a double bill of Homer. But the Odyssey, I mean, the Iliad, of course, the Iliad. I mean, the Iliad's funny because it might even just be the name that, as the reason that people go to the Odyssey. Honestly, this is one of the reasons why names are so important and titles of works are so important, because they are what make or break a work in a way. The name has to be a perfect summary and a statement and a thesis and a foreshadowing. It has to encompass the work. It's the name of the work is probably more important than even anything else when an author is coming up with a work of literature or even a film. This is the reason why when painters title their works untitled, it is such a crock. That's one of the great, you know, great and terrible chaotic things about the chaos of postmodern and modern art is the naming of the artwork untitled. Probably the first time someone did it, it was edgy and it was fine. But every time after that, it's a hoax. It's just not cool. It's not a it's like, we get it. You're saying that the modern world is chaotic and it's full of chaos, and you find no meaning in the world, so your work is untitled. Especially if it's a work of, uh, uh, postmodern, or, neo-expressionism, right? Or paint splotches. Which I'm not denigrating. I'm saying that they fit that work, but that is a chaotic statement of the world, into which I disagree. Obviously, I don't agree with the work, but I see why the artist creates it, because that's what they're saying, and it's also pushed, and it's that's culture creation, and but um you title your work. If you're a writer, title your work. You have to have a title. And that's one of the reasons why with American Gods, I was turned off by even just the name of the work, because there's something about the work that I don't like. It's probably the fact that it doesn't make sense to me on the very first level of having American Gods, because of the fact that we're not we're that's one of the things that the book is about that the old world and comes to the new world, and the old gods are supposed to come to the new world, and they find it hostile, and it doesn't work. So that, in a way, is kind of an unforeseen but predictable consequence of titling your work that way, if that makes sense. And it turns me off. But I understand, obviously, why he calls it that. I mean, and that's what the book is about. I know that, but I'm saying on a deeper subtextual level. Um, the Iliad is probably what turns people off of reading the Iliad, because they don't know what the Iliad means. They don't know what an Iliad is. They know that the Odyssey is about Odysseus. So who's Iliad? Well, it's Ilium, it's Troy. It's just the ancient name for Troy. So the Iliad is about the Trojan War, right? The 10-year war. So Odysseus, the master of the stratagem, takes his 20 years to go there and come back. So maybe we should do the Iliad, because the Iliad is so different from the Odyssey. It's different in tone. It's almost for a completely different audience. One is for going there and one is for returning. So obviously the tone is going to be completely different in terms of what the reader has taken away from them or what the contemporary audience at the time would take away from hearing the bard Homer recite his poems or sing his poems in hexameters. But the Iliad is interesting because it comes before the Odyssey, both in time and in, I don't want to say publication, but in terms of the storyline. But also it's more difficult. So most people read it after the Odyssey. Most people read the Odyssey even when they're little kids, and then you may read the Iliad like when you're in university or something, when you're in college. The Iliad though is in my opinion, it far surpasses the Odyssey. The language of it is transcendent, right? It's so good. Remember remember that scene in the Thin Red Line? Um, Rosy fingered dawn. That's right. We read the Iliad at the point in Greek. Nature's cruel, Charles. Look at the way those vines are twisting around everything, swallowing it up. Nature's cruel, Charles. We got to do the Thin Red Line. That would be a good one. Fire sale. If you want to sponsor a stream on a movie stream, sponsor the Thin Red Line. That would be a great one to do. I mean, that one's a tough one to do. It's difficult, but we could do that one. So let me check my email real quick here because I'm waiting for the email from TNT Radio. So again, one more time before I get into these two final works, we're going to be I'll be on TNT Radio live at 11 o'clock Eastern with Joseph Arthur, and thanks to Ruckus out there. I'll be on for the full hour. That's the third hour of his late night weekend show. So that'll be cool. So please come to TNT Radio and listen to that or listen back to it. Also, the links are in the video description to go back and listen to that 3.5 hours plus that I did on Boiler Room with our friends Hesher, JD. Jay showed up, Jay Dyer, Hesher, Spore, Grunt, Ruckus. Everybody was there. So that was a good one. We talked about the Gladio Orca and the MK Naomi operation where the orcas are training the other gladio orcas, gladiator mice, gladiator orcas. They're called Gladys. Gladys Blanca is the name of the warrior, dowager warrior, pissed off, traumatized orca whale that is training the other orcas in a phalanx maneuver to take down the Bonesman yachts in Europe. And she's called Gladys Blanca because it's like white whale, right? It's like our Moby Dick stream on the Leviathan and Ahab merging together in a neo-Gnostic allegory, falling into the abyss, where there's only one survivor floating on a coffin on the edge of the earth, on the ocean. And Gladys, Gladis, comes from gladio, sword, or gladiator, because they're orcas, because it's a branch of the orca whale. So that's a real story that's going on right now. So speaking of MK Offen and MK Naomi, I watched the movie Coraline today, and I knew about this movie, but I'd always put off watching it because I knew exactly what it was going to be like, and that I was totally confirmed in everything that I said about this, had thought about the movie. So Coraline is a Neil Gaiman written movie, and I'd always thought it was Tim Burton. I never really looked into it really that much, but it has the kind of aesthetic of Tim Burton, but it's not. But it is Wizard of Oz, Return to Oz, and Alice in Wonderland, and kind of Edward Scissorhands, all and The Nightmare Before Christmas, sort of all mixed into one. So what Coraline does is she is a girl. It's animated, but it's like looks like claymation or whatever. And it's animated, and she is living in a new house in a new place with her mom and dad. And then she kind of goes out to play. Her house is called the Pink Palace. Now that right there, red flags right away, right? Because the Pink Palace is always a name for an MK Offen trauma zone. I mean, this occurred. The best example of this was in True Detective season 3. Remember the Pink Palace? Remember he goes down into the bows into the basement of the industrialist house or whatever, and he's looking for the girl. And the room is pink, and it's a vaulted room, and there's pictures of pink castles everywhere. Bad news. So she's living in the pink palace. She goes and walks up a hill. She's trying to find a well with a witching wand, a dowsing rod, and then she's confronted by a local kid with a messed up neck and a three-eyed dystopian post-apocalyptic motorcycle mask, and he focuses in on her. She's followed by a black cat. The black cat, I assume the black cat in the movie is the, I don't know, is the black cat, somebody tell me, is the black cat just the spiritual familiar of the old woman that doesn't appear, that's the grandmother or whatever of the motorcycle boy? Sounds like Technical Boy in the, American Gods. So she's trying to find um, this well, and it's in a circle, it's in a mushroom circle on top of a hill with clouds coming over and a view of the Pink Palace. So where's this going? So she goes back down, and then one night she's in this new house. Her parents aren't paying attention to her. Her dad is you know, clacking away. He's clacking away. I use the word clack. It's a great onomatopoetic word because that's the same as the short story that I'll cover finally called Click Clack the Rattlebag. He's clacking away on a computer, and he's like, "Go explore the house," or whatever, not paying attention to her. So she goes off and she follows these mice. She ends up kind of following three blind mice, Dr. No style, into a secret room. And when she opens the door to the secret room, we see a tunnel, and that she goes down the tunnel. So she goes, it's not a rabbit hole, it's a mouse hole into another world. And the other world is the inverted world of the world she lives in. So whenever we see tunnels in movies like this or in works of literature of this genre, the tunnel represents obviously a few things. The tunnel is number one, it's a kind of a um, sex image, which is what it looks like in the film. It's also a regression. It's supposed to be a brain tube into her inner state because she is being infantilized for the brain protection of a shattered mind. Because when the mind is traumatized and shattered, um, it, the brain's defense mechanism is that it regresses and retreats into a kind of a shadow world, and that's how the splintered mind comes about, right? That's where DID-MPD comes from. And when she comes out the other side, she's also crossing over into the other side. It becomes a cult. So she crosses over to the other side into a weird world where her parents are the same, but they're dolls, and they have black marble eyes, but they're not marbles. They're buttons. So everything is sewn. She goes through a kind of a Steppenwolf, Dance Macabre, Mask of the Red Death, archetypal dream world ritual of meeting various characters, Alice in Wonderland style, including these two tarot soothsaying witch women that live in the basement. And they put on a dumb show, and then finally they put on a kind of an English panto. And they literally, there's one scene where they zip open their skin and they take off their skin suit, and now they're different people. And then they dive into barrels filled with water like an old circus Houdini show. She meets all these various people. It doesn't matter, but but what the movie is truly about, I think, obviously, it's like this is like the most. This is one of the most MK often sub project 119 John Marks movies I've ever seen. It's just another Return to Oz. And my question is, when you watch Coraline, who is this made for? Who are they making this for? Who would, I mean, look, I get it. At least Alice in Wonderland, the original Alice in Wonderland, works because like the aesthetics of it are pleasant, and it's like a classic Diz animated film, right? So it's pleasant. But like, who is this one made for? Like, because some of the subject matter, it's even too spicy and too much for the audience that you think it'd be intended for. But it's not them. They can't be watching this movie, and it can't be like no normal people are like this. This wasn't made for them. And look, it's made for. I guess it's made for people like us who watch the movie and are analyzing it and go, "Oh, this is dark," or it's made. I mean, we know obviously who it's made for. It's made as a trauma bonding movie, right? It's that's obviously what it's made for. But on the surface, to sell the movie, who is it made for? I mean, it's crazy. This is just so dark. And so so anyway, that's my very brief analysis of Coraline. I mean, the imagery in it is so bad. It is so dark. It's so disturbing. I mean, everything's creepy and wobbly and circus-like, and it's like Fear and Loathing. That scene where they go into the circus and they're like, "This is what the whole Hep world would be doing if the Nazis had won the war. This is the Sixth Reich." It's like that. It's like it's just total clown world destructo vision. Shouts out to Nom de Plume, says $20. Sponsored fun movie suggestions. Happy Accidents, Box of Moonlight, Barbarians, Wag the Dog, Big Trouble in Little China. Awesome. Thank you for those. Definitely. Okay, I'm gonna mark those down in the old skull. Um, JD has the classic Big Trouble in Little China. There's nothing to say more about that. And just did Wag the Dog. But I just watched Wag the Dog. Maybe we can look back again at Wag the Dog. And then I'll look at the other three as well. So thank you for the excellent list. Yes, if you want to sponsor a movie stream, drop $20. Um, you can super chat, and especially if you're going to sponsor a stream, drop them in those ones that get direct to me. But any way is great, and that's awesome. Thank you so much. My final analysis is of the movie. No, not the movie. The short story. It's called "Click Clack the Rattle Bag," and "Click Clack the Rattle Bag" is it's a short story. It's like 3 or 4 pages, and I thought this one was probably the best of his works because it has such an economy of style. It's supposed to be fire sale. It's supposed to be a work dedicated to short short stories, short children's literature stories, um, where the reader grabs onto the imagery and takes something away from it in a short space. Remember, Hemingway tried to come up with the the one sentence novel, and so it's kind of like that. So what happens in Click Clack the Rattlebag is again, this is like Coraline. It was incredibly dark. Basically, it's a guy is like babysitting, and for it says the guy's babysitting for his like girlfriend's sibling. But then it's weird because there's a dissonance. He explains who his girlfriend is to the kid and that she's away somewhere, and that was bizarre in it. Anyway, so what happens is they're telling ghost stories, and the kid says, "Well, I got a ghost story, a scary story. It's called Click Clack the Rattlebag," and he explains that when you're in a dark place or in a dark house and you're walking through and you hear a click clack, um, there's a it's not a ghost, and it's not he explains that it's not a vampire because a vampire sucks your blood but leaves a little bit behind so that you live a living death, so the blood is tainted. And also, obviously, we've done vampires here so many times, like vampirism is obviously a duino, right? Stealing the life essence and a total inversion of everything that's good. It's demonic energy. Um, but this, he says, the kid says, is worse. What he does is he sucks your insides and your soul like through your skull eye holes and mixes everything up on your insides into a milkshake composition, and then hangs you up in a rattle bag for the wind to take you away. And he's as he's telling the story, they're holding hands. He's walking him up to bed. He's going to tell him he's going to, he's going to read him a story before he goes to bed. But then the guy listening to the story realizes that he hears a click clack, and then he walks into the darkness. So I think you know where that story's going. It's the same sort of Coraline thing. It's so dark, and it's a kind of a DID story where we have a person telling the story through someone else. It's an inversion because the ghost story isn't told by the older person to the kid. It's the opposite. But is that really the case in the short story? And also, and also who's the one that's being hung up as the rattlebag. I thought that was interesting because the rattlebag is also a book of collected poems by Ted Hughes and Seamus Heaney that they worked together on, and it's supposed to mimic like book bag or backpack, but it's a rattlebag. That's like a kind of a old like an old Celtic sort of folk tale image of bones in the bag or runes in a bag, tying back to American gods. And so the words represent spells in the bag, and the bag is set loose and fate takes its way, which is the way that it always is in these sort of pagan myths. So check that out. Read that short story. It's pretty disturbing and it's only 3 pages. It also reminded me of the Joyce Carol Oates short story that we did a year ago, which was where are you going? Where have you been? And not many people here have probably seen that, but that was one of the early analyses that we did. And it's a great short story because not only does it tie in Bob Dylan is one of the major characters mentioned in the short story, but it's also just like The Witch and Hereditary. A character shows up, he's kind of a goat character, a goat man, Lucifer character who takes a girl away on a golden chariot of a in a car with a series of occult numbers, and it's about people that are missing, right, or taken away, which is what Coraline's about. American Gods has a sort of a play in that, but it's interesting that there's a lot of Grimm's fairy tales that are kind of tied into Neil Gaiman's writing, but, it just doesn't, he's retelling the story, but yeah, that is an interesting short story. I thought that was probably the best one. So, again, if you want to catch me on, um if you wanna catch me outside then, uh, if you want to I'm sorry. If you wanna catch me tonight in about an hour, then you can go here to, Joseph Arthur's homepage on TNT Radio Live, and you can catch me talking about, whatever. I don't know what we're gonna talk about. We'll talk about probably literature, culture, maybe movies, and that's about an hour away, so that's 11 o'clock on TNT Radio Live. Um, and let me see if I got the confirmation for that. Okay, so I just got the confirmation for that, so I'll need to get off here in a second, and also, don't forget that you can support me anytime at Cash App, Venmo, PayPal. Here, one of those right here. You can sponsor stream. If you want to email me, you can email me at madmaximalism@gmail.com, MAXX, two X's. Let me just reply to this real quick, guys. Um, because this is coming up in an hour. Okay, sent that off. And I hope it's been a great week for everybody. Excuse me. Listen, it's time for shouts out before we go. Shouts out to all the people that supported me again. And let me just end the stream by giving a big shouts out to all of our friends that are in Nashville right now, because we're missing that. And I had a lot going on. I had a big thing to do today, which was very important, so I couldn't make it there. But shouts out to all of our friends there, especially Real Cooter Brown, Digital Minefield, who is there, our homeboy from here, Maddie. Shouts out to Based Homeschool Mama, who's there, who's keeping us up to date with what's happening there in Nashville at the Rebels for Cause event. Shouts out to our friends JD, Jay Dyer, Jamie Hanshaw, David Patrick Harry, Chase Haggard is there, Andy's there, Harrison Smith is there. Also, I think Joseph Arthur is there. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. You guys can check up on that at Courtney Turner's channel. That's her event, and you can follow all the goings on there. I had a big event today. I had a graduation I went to. I can't really say much more about it, but I will say that it was a very it impacted me a lot I don't usually talk about, you know, like things, in my life or whatever like that. But I will say that it was a big deal, and that I lost my little homeboy that I cared about a lot this year, and so it was great to see him honored there. And that really, I feel things pretty deep. I mean, I know that sounds make what you will of that or whatever, but I feel things pretty deeply. And so that got me in my heart today. To see that. So that really got me. God bless him, and may he rest in peace. And and so that was a big deal. It's been a one heck of a year. There's been a lot that's going on. We've had highs and lows. I'm sure everybody out there has. And we gotta, you know, be kind. Kindness is a virtue. I don't know about nice, but kind, uh, to each other and support each other. And I certainly appreciate all the support that you guys give me. And I hope I keep, you know, reading these books for you so you don't have to, or so that you will. And shouts out to Jethro out there, my good friend, and Jerry exposing powerful lies. Saw him in here. And shouts out to Nom de Plume again for sponsoring this stream. Again, if you want to support me, you can do that anytime on those links. And you can share the stream, like the stream, and yeah, let's just you can get me out there. Okay, if you want to see me on somebody's channel, you can let them know, because I love talking to people. And so we got a lot of books coming up. Again, we're gonna do Killers of the Flower Moon because the movie's coming up. Also in this random stack, I got One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Ken Kesey. We're gonna do that. That one's gonna be for our homeboy Mick, Technoir Graphics, because he I was gonna do that, but he brought it up that he loves that, so we're gonna do that for him. Probably gonna do Truman Capote's In Cold Blood in a while. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, more Shakespeare as you like it, more modern movies. We're going to do lots of movie analysis. We got Great Expectations, Charles Dickens, um, big stack over there. So support me so I can keep getting books, you guys. That's about all I got. I love y'all. Thank you so much for being here for this stream. And I will see you soon. Please remember to stop by at TNT Radio later on tonight. And let me check super chats again one more time, because I'm really bad about checking that. And also donor chat. So I'm bad about checking that. So, um, yeah, shouts out to Evan who sponsored us last time on there. I mean, who supported us last time on there. And again, shouts out to Jason. So that's about all I got. So that's it, you guys. And to take us out, here's Rooks G and cut off his new album. Here's Atlantic Drift, our homeboy Rooks G over at YouTube. See y'all. Peace.